Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cancer Doctor podcast. I am your host, Robert Carrillo, and today we are meeting with Katrina Foe. She is a board-certified holistic nutritionist out of the state of Idaho. She works remotely with a variety of patients that have been diagnosed with cancer. She has a very unique story in regards to the cancer journey itself because she herself has battled cancer. Katrina, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I'm excited to introduce you to our audiences. But why don't you first, just by way of introduction, tell the audience who you are, how you got into this, why this is important. Obviously, sprinkle it with a little bit of your story before I begin to bombard you with my own specific questions today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Robert. That was a lot of questions. I was 37 years old and nursing my fifth baby, and I had a mastitis, and it cleared up, and there was still a golf ball size lump. And I just kind of attributed it to, the nursing mother's breast tissue kind of changes and shifts. And there were some family members that were a little concerned. And when I dug in and did some testing, it turned out it was cancer. And this was just like completely out of the blue. I felt healthy. I had no symptoms. I had never had anything crazy health wise. And I was the healthy one in my group. I was doing all the stuff, making everything from scratch. We'd already been on a health journey with one of my children, and seen profound changes. So I felt like, I'd been doing that for several years already. How, when I exercise and eat healthy and all the stuff, could this happen? And the journey through healing, it led me to functional medicine, to really answer a lot of my questions of why did this happen, as well as, what do I need to keep my eye on? How do I need to monitor and watch so that this doesn't happen again? And that whole process got me so excited, Robert. I just wanted to understand the body better. And a lot of the information I was looking for wasn't out there readily available in a clear way. There's a lot of controversy. And so this led me to going back to school and becoming a practitioner and eventually working with cancer clients myself.
Wow. A couple things that you said there that I think there's going to be someone watching this and it's going to resonate. You said you were living life really well when this happened, eating well, exercising. That seems like that would be very discouraging to then come down with a diagnosis of cancer. How did that, at that point in time in your life, challenge you um, in this respect to just keep going? If you've already done everything well, and now you come down with a diagnosis, what is going to motivate you to try to do things better? I mean, you're already doing them better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, when I say I was doing all the right stuff, I'm not talking on a superficial, like I ate healthy kind of thing. I'm talking like we moved to a different state to raise our own meat animals, no hormones, antibiotics, all that kind of stuff, like taking it to the, nth level. So yeah, it was extremely discouraging that what I was doing was not having the effect I wanted of having truly good health. So what I did is I put everything on the table because I realized something I was doing was not working. I had something wrong. And I think this is a key takeaway that a lot of people can benefit from, because a lot of times what we do as people is we hear something, read something, someone we admire says something, and we just take it as that's truth. Our government tells us something. This is how it is. This is how we learn. This is how we grew up. This is truth. And we don't ever go back and re-question that and say, has there, been any research that's showing something different? Is there more clinical evidence that this is not the best out there? So I put everything, all my sacred cows on the table and reevaluate everything. And it was really interesting. I had gotten a lot of things right, but there were a lot of things that I didn't even know to look at. There were a lot of things that I had no idea were issues that came to my attention through this process.
That's fantastic. And I just want to commend you for that, because what you're describing, this is my personal experience. You're like a 10 percenter. Maybe you're a 5 percenter, a 1 percenter, because you're saying you were willing to put everything on the table. That's after doing so much, doing so much well. And you're like, well, I'm going to start over and reassess it one more time with a fine tooth comb. Most people are not going to go that far. What,
At this point, it was my life. And I was, like I said, 37. I wasn't 87. I had a lot of living. I had a new baby and I had a lot of other kids. So this was not something I was taking lightly. If not for me, that I wanted it for them.
okay, wonderful. Now, what year was this when this occurred to you personally?
2015.
Okay. All right. 11 years ago almost. Got it. And I didn't mention it at the beginning of this podcast, but if for anyone watching this, if you want to find Katrina and read more about her story, you can go to her website, which is cancerfreedom.com. That's cancerfreedom.com, and you'll learn more about her. Katrina, question for you. In 2015, you mentioned, as you were reevaluating everything, you started getting into functional medicine. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what role did that play? What was the potential you saw in that? Who introduced you to it?
Yeah. My digging into everything led me down some wild paths. And I was so grateful. A friend of mine connected me with a practitioner that did functional medicine. And frankly, I had never heard of functional medicine at that point. I didn't, I knew people did some testing on things, but I did not know anything really about it. And I certainly had never done any of it. I had never done just like even standard panels, really, except for like what you do for life insurance. And so this testing, she was looking at all the things that are in the research that are showing cause cancer, known carcinogens, to then see which of these were issues for me. And this is the same methodology that I use with my clients today, because that insight to not just guess what's wrong with me, not just look at my symptoms, but really see objective data. So not only can we know what we need to work with, but then see numbers if what we're doing is effective. I had a lot of stuff going on that I didn't realize that I didn't have symptoms for. And today, as a practitioner, I see this all the time with my clients. I work primarily with middle-aged women. They're healthy and they're not having symptoms. So this is where we want to dig in further and really be able to see, and testing allows us to do that.
So if I'm understanding correctly, Ren tells you about functional medicine and these doctors that are providing this kind of care, they're doing some tests that wouldn't generally be done in the standard of care, I guess. Is that what I'm hearing?
100%. So functional medicine is kind of confusing for clients because there's not like a functional medicine, like, licensed doctor. Like it's different. So any practitioner, whether it's a medical doctor, a naturopathic doctor, a nutritionist, a dietitian, a nurse practitioner, any of these things can then take additional training and go through and learn about functional training. And what makes it even more complicated is that some functional training is a couple hours and some is a couple years. So there's vast differences. And so this is going to teach you how to read and interpret labs that are not covered in medical school. They're not covered by standard of care, as well as to how to create custom protocols and how to see the body as a whole in terms of what else. Diet, lifestyle changes and modifications need to be a part of this to help affect changing those functional markers.
Okay, so just because a practitioner, some healthcare provider claims to be a functional medical doctor, let's just say as an example, the level of training is different. Some might be, if this was baseball, some are playing minor league baseball, some are playing major league baseball. They have more advanced training, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because someone's going to listen to this and hear functional medicine and then immediately think to themselves, okay, they've all received the same level of training. But you're saying that's not the case.
No, it's not the case at all. And this is a really big point of confusion for most clients in this industry right now. And if you go out there and just Google like functional medicine, a lot of times if it's, somebody like a doctor or somebody like that has the ability to prescribe, that's their primary training. And that's going to tend to, not always, be their bend in terms of learning. Now, to make it additionally more complicated, a lot of times with functional medicine, when we are going to interpret those labs, we want to look at, what is going to be recommended. Are they recommending prescriptions to adjust these? Or are they recommending herbs or food? Because, if a medical doctor is trained in functional medicine in the labs, are they trained in nutrition? Are they trained in herbs? Because most of them are not. That is not covered in medical school either. So just as much as it is inappropriate for me as a nutritionist to be telling people what prescriptions to take, it's inappropriate for a medical doctor that's not have additional nutrition training to be telling people what to eat.
Wow. Okay. That's massive. That's big. That's significant. Now, a cancer doctor, we pre-qualify the people that we work with. And for those of you watching this, we recently pre-qualified Katrina and her cancerfreedom.com. And so she's a verified plus practitioner on our web pages. So you could feel confident that you can reach out to Katrina and get in touch with her organization or to find additional help. But Katrina, you're not a medical doctor, so you're operating almost as a liaison. Is that correct? Fill that in a little bit for us. And when I say liaison, I'm thinking about you have some relationships possibly with functional doctors, possibly, or people are coming to you to get a baseline understanding of how to pursue their care, what they should do, for that care. Why don't you unpack that a little bit for our viewers so they get an understanding as to why would I want to contact Katrina and work with her? In other words, who is the audience? Who are the individuals that you can help and why? What does that look like?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it gets very confusing. So, first off, I work virtually. So, as much as I would love to have all my clients be able to give them a hug, you don't have to travel to me, which is nice. I know that was a big deal during my cancer journey. So what I do is I like to support the women or men that have cancer in finding out and really digging into why did this happen? Because that is a question that our standard of care is not answering. And what I have found is that I am not alone in being, someone with cancer that really feels that I have to know this information in order to proceed further. So whether people are wanting to do standard of care, some or all of it, or if they don't, or if they're done with their standard of care, I'm going to be coming in and we run all the tests of things that show up on, the radar in research to cause cancer so that we know what that person, why they got cancer. That's our guarantee. They will know why they got cancer. Now, of course, we wouldn't just leave them, here's your why, without anything, but we will also then give them specific personalized recommendations for how to address those things. So supporting the body in those different areas that are showing up on their labs. And then knowing your why on the functional labs is going to give us insight and direction to make recommendations on the adjunctive therapies. So the sexy things you hear about talked about like IV vitamin C, mistletoe, hyperbaric oxygen, even the cheaper things like methylene blue, we can see which ones are going to be the, biggest bang for your buck, if you will. And we can also tease out the ones that can actually be harmful.
You've said some really important things, and I want to peel the onion back with you a little bit here. You mentioned you help identify why that individual got a cancer diagnosis. That's significant. That's a big statement. Why I got it. Are we saying specifically, okay, this was the cause of this cancer diagnosis, or are we saying this is a contributing factor to why you got cancer?
That's a good tease out. And with the technology we have right now, we can't be quite that specific. So what I am saying is like, okay, these areas are showing in the research to cause cancer, drive cancer, be associated with cancer. We're going to cover all of that. If it's related to possibly stimulating cancer in any way, I want to identify it. And then what do we currently have testing for that we can see as much as possible of what is correlated that's actually happening in that person? So if mold, for example, it's a known carcinogen, there are lots of wicked strains out there that cause cancer. It's very well established. This is why you can't sell a house that has mold in most states without disclosing it. Let's check and see if that's an issue for the cancer client, because especially with mold, there's really significant implications if you don't take care of it. Say you do your standard of care, you go home, you're still in the house that is giving you mold, and you still keep getting more mold that causes more cancer. Do you think the cancer is going to come back? And so we're not necessarily able to say, exactly, is it causal or is it just driving and exactly, but either which way, we're still getting to the general, why did this happen? And with that, we can, really move the dial in terms of supporting the body in the areas that it's not doing well with.
I want to summarize this. So what I'm hearing you say is you will help an individual client by having them submit to some tests, do some labs, right? Some sophisticated lab tests. And through those tests, we're going to identify the contributing factors that are carcinogens that show up on these labs. And then from there, put together a potential game plan or protocol of sorts of things that could reduce the load, the carcinogen load in their body, while at the same time facilitating the healing of the body. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The things that we find typically fall into a couple of categories. One, it's going to be like a deficiency. They have low vitamin D. That's one that most people are familiar with. There can be also an imbalance. So like the hormones, oftentimes people are familiar with estrogen dominance. So estrogen's too high, progesterone too low. We're going to bring that back into balance. And then the third category are like toxins. So whether it's mold or mercury poisoning or like any of these kinds of chemicals that we are exposed to that are known endocrine disruptors causing breast cancer, et cetera, these kinds of things. Parasites are getting a lot of attention nowadays. H. pylori. I mean, there's a lot of different things in that bucket that we want to detox from.
This is so different than the way at least Americans typically think about healthcare. Mm-hmm. When I communicate with people, and I think we're all guilty of this in a lot of areas, not just health, we isolate a problem. In other words, I have a problem and I need to isolate one specific thing that caused this problem. Kind of like, oh, the light bulb broke. Who hit it? Who struck it? Who caused it to pop? But what you're discussing, when I hear you say something like deficiencies, imbalances, toxins, parasites, you're now telling me that the body will tell us a fuller story, not one thing, not isolating one thing, but actually a full-blown journal is what our body will tell us if we go in and begin to run some sophisticated labs. Is that what I'm hearing?
100%, Robert. And here's the thing that I find really interesting. As I'm out there talking to people, potential clients, people that have cancer, I ask them all the time, like, okay, so how many things do you think there need to be messed up on these tests in order for them to get cancer? And usually they're saying one. Sometimes they'll say 3 or 4. But what we see is it's going to be 7 or 8, because our bodies are so beautifully designed that there are backup systems for the backup systems. And we have all these amazing processes in the way that our body is designed to look for, on an ongoing basis, seek out and destroy rogue cancer cells when they pop up. And this is why you hear people saying, all the time that everybody has cancer. There's always cancer cells. We have circulating tumor cells in our bloodstream and such. And that's what our body is supposed to keep in check. And it takes 7 or 8 things to allow this to be so overwhelming that our immune system kind of drops the ball and allows a tumor to grow.
Or maybe not even drop the ball, but just finally get to the point of fatigue. I mean, if our body has been assaulted by 7 or 8 or more contributors that are carcinogens,
Mm-hmm.
and like anything, I mean, you may be able to stay up all night, but can you stay up 40 hours without falling asleep, right? You finally fatigue. And that's kind of how I see cancer sometimes, is that the body biologically is at a fatigue state. And within that fatigue, now maybe a tumor begins to form.
Yeah, yeah, that overwhelm, fatigue, 100%. And this is where, I'm so grateful to the testing that we have, but we keep getting better testing. So we're going to be able to do more with this even in the future. But even at the current state right now, like we can see 7 or 8 things. But if you're just looking for one thing, as soon as you find the first thing, you stop testing and you're very likely to miss the rest of them, which that's a fatal error because it's going to be, did you get enough to clear the overwhelm away from your body to let it do its thing? Now, like for me, for example, I had a golf ball sized lump in my left breast. No surgery, no chemo, no radiation. My body, this is the way it's designed, which just blows my mind even now, was able to dismantle and eliminate that on its own with just supporting and getting that, debris and overwhelm out of the way.
I want to back up because, and this is something that, obviously I wanted to dive into with you today on the testing, because this is really your wheelhouse. This is something that you're passionate about. In your own personal story back in 2015, and I know the tests have evolved, but for yourself, how many tests did you end up obtaining? Number one. Number two, what percentage of those tests were covered by insurance, right? And three, how valuable were those tests for you ultimately on a personal level back then in 2015 when you were first discovering all this?
Yeah, super good questions. So I was able to get testing on most of the things that I test now. The big one that she didn't test me on was mold. And I was really grateful because that came up to my awareness and attention in another way, like while I was still dealing with stuff. But the tests that I'm using, again, there's just better tests out there. Some of the tests she had to run 2 different ways to get the different markers. And, now we can here's one thing. In terms of insurance, this stuff is not covered. Unfortunately, for me, I use Samaritan and they did cover it. And I will tell you, if you're on Samaritan, they're amazing, cover way more in terms of natural healthcare than any other company that I've ever seen. But of course, their stuff is evolving. So, it may not always be that way. Right now with health insurance, it doesn't cover functional testing for the most part. Blood work, a lot of times it can cover, but I'm just going to be super frank with you. Like the list of extensive blood work that I want, I have never once had a doctor or insurance get all the markers I wanted. I have to order it myself if I want to get all the markers, and then insurance doesn't usually cover it. So it's kind of a weird thing. So what I've done is everything is packaged in my program, along with all the other support, because I don't want people to miss things. If I'm going to guarantee that why you got cancer, I have to have the test that I want and make sure that I get everything.
Got it. So what happened in your case was, after going through this particular, walking down this road and having all these tests done, after a period of time, your cancer resolves, and then you decide, you know what, I'm going to do this for others that are looking for this kind of help. Is that how this ended up?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. All
Part
right.
of it, even at the very beginning, I originally started my nutrition training because I just wanted to know more. And there was so much controversy out there. I'm like, I want to go back to the basics and really understand everything for myself and my family. Going into the functional medicine testing courses that I took, I wanted to get access to get these tests myself. A lot of times I couldn't always get the tests I wanted as a consumer, which to me is a whole separate issue, but I'm very passionate about that. I mean, these tests should be available to everyone. It's not a drug, it's a test. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of things there.
Yeah, there is. How much training do you have in this area of functional medicine yourself?
Mhm.
It sounds like you did a deep dive in it after your own personal experience.
Yeah, so I did 2 years of training for me learning as a practitioner. So, looking at stool tests and looking at blood work, looking at hormones, all sorts of different hormone tests, genetics, autoimmune, all the different toxin panels, like all this kind of stuff. And then I was actually asked and invited to be brought on as faculty for that same company. So, best way to learn it is to teach it. And it was
Right.
my pleasure and joy to get that even deeper understanding because lots of questions pummeling at me all the time.
Do you mind sharing with our audience what that organization?
Yeah, absolutely. The Institute of Restorative Wellness.
Okay.
It's a fantastic training, very focused on food as medicine, and then, herbs and such as needed to really help bring balance and such again.
That's fantastic. That's so encouraging. One of the things that, and this is just not just a plug for you, but for everybody out there that might need it. I realize that we're very tied into medical insurance in this country, and that it becomes really discouraging when the patient goes, "Oh, wow, that's not covered by insurance." We're on a mission here at Cancer Doctor to encourage everyone to start thinking about their health differently. The way they would pay for a gym membership out of their own pocket, they need to start paying out of pocket for tests, for medical appointments, et cetera, that are not covered by medical insurance. Because typically medical insurance really equates to sick care, not true health care. And if you want to get to the bottom of something, you're typically going to need to pay for it out of pocket. I let people know most homeowners don't have a insurance policy that is paying for the plumber or paying for the roof or paying for the HVAC equipment, and neither does our body. We need to set some monies aside so that we can contract out, if necessary, partner with people like Katrina and her organization at Cancer Freedom in order to get further down the line in the healing journey and all. So, on that note, Katrina, if someone in the audience decides to contact you by going to your website at cancerfreedom.com and they want to work with you, what does that look like for most of the clientele that's contacting you? Just overall, bird's eye view, what takes place?
Yeah. So at this point, I'm only working with cancer clients. If you need someone else, I can refer out. When you go to the website, there's an application. It's going to take you to schedule a time to talk with one of my staff, myself or my staff. And when we onboard you, once, if it's a good fit for you, and we'll tell you if it's not, you get immediate access to our portal. I'm very passionate about learning. My clients are voracious learners. And so we're going to satisfy that by helping you understand the body as a whole better. We're going to start with diet. So everybody's got tweaks and we can dial that in. So we're going to get into ketosis and we're going to help you get to a therapeutic level of ketosis and really teach you how to not only food source and meal plan, but how to test yourself to see your reactions to the food specifically. Now, while we're doing that, we're also doing all the testing. So the testing all gets sent to your house. Urine, stool, saliva, you can do in the privacy of your own home, prepaid envelopes. The blood work, we don't do at home. That would be weird. And so you get a requisition to a center that can go ahead and do the blood draw for you. You'll get all your tests back entered into the portal and you'll get your customized protocols. You'll get your root cause driver assessment so you can really see which markers go with which of the areas that are off. And then you're going to get your recommendations for adjunctive therapies, if you want to up things a little bit more. And so then you can go through and be like, oh, this marker XYZ is high. What does that mean? And you can watch the video about that marker in the portal and really understand your labs way, way deeper. I've been doing one-on-ones for years, and you can never get all the information in 1 hour. To get the level of interest and understanding that my clients have, they need more. If they're going through things like mold or chemo, they want a replay, and so this you can watch anytime, and just really helps leverage technology for our own good. With that, this is very personalized, and everybody has a different experience, whether it's symptoms or what supplements they're already taking and questions about what to keep taking. And so we have every week live Q&As where I'll get on and answer whatever questions you want, whether it's about how to talk to your mother-in-law that you don't want to eat XYZ at Christmas, or, what does this marker mean, or how do I retest, or any of this stuff. So, and I don't think I mentioned this, but I actually myself was kicked out of a cancer clinic because I asked too many questions. And that was really early in my journey. And I have a passion for people asking questions. So whenever we have too many questions for that session, we just put another one on the calendar for that week to make sure everybody's questions get answered. I don't know, as a practitioner, what I find is the people that are asking questions, they're asking questions because they're digging in. They're trying to really understand and apply it. And it's in the application that questions come up. And I want my clients to be applying and getting the results. So I want to answer those questions.
It sounds like you're really advocating for the patient to improve their own personal health literacy about themselves in a very innovative kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those, what percentage do you think of your clients are getting inspired by this? Like, hey,
Oh,
this.
yeah. A lot of them take it further. So for me, it's about taking responsibility. It's not about like just getting cancer free, and getting no evidence of disease. It's really about like, what do I need to do for the rest of my life? What was I maybe doing that I can improve upon? And then it spirals out because most of my women are moms, to the last call, we were just talking about like, oh, well, if I have mold and our house has mold, do my kids and husband have mold? Like, how to unravel that and really make a huge effect, not just on the cancer client, but the entire family environment. And so when you understand, those questions make sense and then they can be addressed. If you're just doing standard of care, you don't know that you need to take action for other people, and that, oh, that chronic sinus infection my husband has, it's not really a sinus infection, it's really a mold. And so we can get to, help other things as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah, because I could see how this would affect the entire family in a positive way, in a good way. Because if one individual is suffering, it's like, well, maybe someone else in the family is suffering, or we can mitigate this risk. I find that to be really, really encouraging, because at that point, you're really supporting the family's own personal health development at that point, which is great. That's fantastic. You mentioned these online meetings that you have with your clients remotely. Typically, how many clients are in those meetings together?
Oh, it varies wildly. We do have a way to upload questions ahead of time if people aren't going to be on the calls and watch the recordings, because, a lot of our clients are still, working, or they're in remission and back to work and such. Usually, a couple dozen or something, but there's a lot of questions put in there, and a lot of them get into good conversations, and there's dialogue and discussion. And even just this last one, there was prayer time where someone's like, can we just pray over this? And like, yes, we can.
Now, if your clients need a doctor recommendation that is trustworthy, are you able to facilitate that as well for them?
Yeah, that looks different for different clients. So like if I'm seeing that maybe a thyroid prescription, or maybe they need some, on their adjunctive therapies, maybe something like mistletoe is recommended and they need a prescription and things. First off, I just talk to the client of like, do you have somebody? And a lot of times they already have people they're working with local. And if they need any help facilitating that, we can work on that. If they don't, I have some practitioners, depending on what we're talking about, that I can connect them with. But yeah, a lot of it's just like, okay, here's what you want to look for in a good practitioner, that kind of thing as well.
Okay. Yeah, because so much of this, what you're explaining, sounds like it's very much evidence-based driven
Mm-hmm.
type of guidance that you're providing to the client. So I think that's an important thing to highlight for everyone out there. What are some of the most frequently asked questions that your clients are asking of you once they enroll in all that you're finding over the years? Because I know there has to be some of the same repetitive questions that come up, I would think, but maybe not. Maybe it looks different for you. What are some of those frequently asked questions?
So I mean, literally my whole portal is answering the questions I see typically, because again, it just leverages everybody's time. They can watch it whenever they want. I don't have to say the same thing. So in the Q&As, what we're doing is getting really personal. So for example, doing a ketogenic diet with cancer is different than, just for random weight loss, because a lot of times things like stress and mold and, things that spike your cortisol are going to have an effect. And so we want to really do the work of not just eating keto, but we want to see like, what is that? What's throwing me out? What's blocking me? So we can get a better insight as to what's going on in our body. So questions around that a lot of times are coming up real personal. And then a lot of times another category would be the supplements. So whether it's, most clients come to me, they've got a laundry list of supplements, and, we'll dive into like, okay, just get those out yesterday. Okay, those are okay, but let's, see what the testing says if they're amazing. And then these are like, oh yeah, I keep taking those. Those are great. And that's what your testing is showing. And that's where we can make connections and kind of really fine tune what the testing is showing with what they've already been doing, and mesh everything. And along those lines, if they are doing standard of care, combining this work with, say, chemotherapy or surgery or something, we'll do a lot of personalization on that. And depending on how much the oncologist wants to participate, that can look different.
Got it. So it sounds to me, just on that explanation, you're really aiming for, you don't want the patient doing more than what's necessary as far as a protocol, nor do you want them to do less than what is necessary. You're really looking to refine what it is that they need individually, and then direct them down that road. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is an interesting point, because with cancer, very different than most other like health issues. I mean, cancer, there's this monkey brain that usually happens of, am I doing enough? And they are constantly bombarded, whether they're doing standard of care or not, with like what else they could do. Oh, I could take this supplement or this oil, or I need to scratch my hip 3 times a day, whatever it is. And it just keeps accumulating to where the client is like, it's a full-time job, and it can cost a fortune just in all these supplements, and you don't really know what is working and what isn't. And so one of the things that I love, that was really, important to me when I was going through my journey, is the testing can show you, okay, this is what you need. These are your most important things. I mean, yes, if you have the pill threshold, you could add this on, but this is not meeting one of your core needs, so that you can really rest and not have to play that game anymore.
That's really good, because the temptation is always going to be there. I think that we're always being marketed to. There's always something new that's great for us. It's the fountain of youth. And the temptation to, well, I'm going to buy that and I'm going to add that in to my existing protocol. But at some point, continually buying things becomes unsustainable. And then there's how much time I need to allow to consume it, right? So,
And just the stress of more pills. How much can your liver handle?
right,
There's a tipping point.
right. So the testing that you're doing is really looking to define yes to these primary, as an example here, supplements, and maybe on these, and definitely no, there's no benefit on this over here, just probably better not to take it. Is that fair, the way this is being managed?
Yeah, yeah. I call it the pill threshold. Everybody's got a little different how many they can handle. But, my focus with the testing is to really zoom in and be laser sharp on like, what do they need so that we don't have to have an overload. And, there are a lot of, usually there's at least one or two things that I'm like, stop taking this. It's got iron in it. It's got copper in it. It's got like never with cancer take a multivitamin over the counter. But even like, if they've got Hashimoto's diagnosis, like no on the iodine, things like that are really important. And, clients don't know if they're not trained in cancer, or even oncologists aren't trained in the herbs and all the minerals and stuff. They're not looking at these things to know. Oh, ashwagandha, no, stop. Some of these things just need to be stopped across the board, regardless of the testing.
Wow. That's valuable information, because you mentioned a lot of good things, but they may not be for you.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it's the state the body's in, what it needs, and that's going to shift over the course of our lifetime. And if you're in a cancer state, for example, it's a very oxidative state, and oxidative therapies can be helpful, but if you get too oxidative, they can actually be harmful. And so this is where it's a lot of these wonderful natural things, they get a bad rap because we're not using the testing that we have currently to really be discerning of what is appropriate in the time and space that that cancer client is at. So the things like IV vitamin C that can be some of the most amazing can do the most harm if they're not used judiciously.
Yeah, because based upon that comment you just made, there's some really great therapies out there, adjunctive therapies that patients may not need to take, or they shouldn't be doing it at all if
Mm-hmm.
they haven't assessed their current state with a specific test. And I think you mentioned vitamin C here. Not everybody does well with vitamin C. Uh,
No, no.
Most people think that a vitamin C infusion is always going to be great for them, but there is a test to determine whether or not it'll be helpful for you. But yeah.
Yeah. And it could just be neutral, where when you're talking about IV vitamin C, that takes a lot of time and it's expensive. And as somebody that doesn't like needles, it could be a little traumatic, So it can be harmful. It could be maybe a waste of money, or it could be really beneficial.
Mhm.
And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge IV vitamin C fan. But a lot of people aren't doing enough if they're doing it. Once a week is not the preferred schedule if you really want an effect. And that's what most clients are doing when they're doing it. So there's a lot of layers in there. And it's hard when, you're listening to the person that sells it, to get all your information from.
Right. You mentioned earlier a couple of times, you mentioned keto diet. Is your program something that is, when it comes to diet, just advocating a keto diet, or is it more, once again, we need to test and find out what the best diet is for you, holistically speaking? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, so we're doing a keto diet, but it's going to be very tailored to the individual because we know cancer is a metabolic disease. And first priority, we want to get the glucose levels down in the client, get that blood sugar regulated. Now, sometimes some cancers can shift around what they're feeding on, but the research is showing us that ketones, when we get them to a nice high level, can slow tumor growth, stop growth completely, as well as altering some of these cancer driving pathways, which can be invaluable. So it's not just the eating keto, like, It's not the Velveeta and bacon diet. It's about getting it really clean and then making sure you still have like good vegetables and stuff as a part of that. It's not dirty processed keto. And then, of course, you want to be able to test yourself, not just guess. That's kind of my theme, and see what is throwing me out. Because a lot of times there's other things like saunas, exercise. Those are good things, but they can raise your blood sugar and potentially throw you out. And so we want to play with, well, if I eat less of this or more of that or a different time, and we can really manage it and optimize as much as possible.
So it's a ketogenic diet that's tailored to the patient based
Yeah.
upon the test. Got it.
Yeah. And we'll look at things like genetics, and there's certain genetic SNPs that, clients have that are like showing that, red meat isn't necessarily the best for them. And so we dive into that as well to really fine tune it in lots of different ways.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned about, conventional medicine, and just by way of definition for those that are listening to this, when we say conventional, we're typically talking about, I'm going to receive full dose chemotherapies, or I'm going to receive radiation for this cancer diagnosis, this type of thing. And you're introducing your clients to a completely different way of looking at their health, right? There's a bigger story going on here. But you mentioned that if the patient is receiving conventional care, that this is something they can incorporate. And so that brings me to this question. Is the Cancer Freedom Program, is it anti-conventional care?
No,
Conventional?
no.
Is it? Because so much of the time patients might hear this and someone goes, oh, that's just one of those anti-conventional cancer deals,
Yeah.
or, dialogue. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I get that a lot, especially since people see me and they're like, oh, well, she did all natural, but I don't want to do it all natural. That's not how I play. I believe first and foremost, very strongly, that it is your body and you get to decide what you want done to it. Nobody should be bullying you or pressuring you or telling you what to do. They should be educating you and helping you decide. But, this is where our medical system's a little disconnected. There's not just one thing you can do for cancer. And even just the idea of standard of care has to be those things, like we're discounting and taking away freedom of choice with the way insurance bills. So on that note, yes, I did it all natural. I have clients that work on things all natural. But a lot of my clients are post, doing standard of care. And there's a lot of cleanup from the standard of care that also needs to be done. And a lot of my clients are just frankly scared. They're scared of like not doing standard of care because they've grown up hearing this is what you have to do. If you have cancer, you have to do chemo and surgery and blah, blah, blah. And so the idea of not doing it freaks them out. Totally fine. And you can do that and do this root cause work. And they actually work really well together, because if you get in a ketogenic state, the research is showing us the chemo is more effective. The radiation is more effective. If you do, lymph drainage work before and after surgery, you're way less likely to get things like lymphedema. So the research shows us that this is effective. The main thing that is different is you just need to change the timing a little bit. For example, if your tests come back and it shows that you have like parasites or mold or something like that, we're not going to do a parasite detox or a mold cleanse while you're doing chemotherapy. That would be way too much stress in the body. But what we can do is, while you're doing the chemotherapy, do all the diet stuff, support anything else, and we can make sure you are remediating your house to make sure you don't have more mold coming in, which is going to create more of a burden while you're doing the chemotherapy.
It sounds real pro-patient outcome is what I call it, right? It's pro-patient outcome.
I love our group because there's a mixture of everything, and there's nothing but love and support. There's no disrespect or shaming or any of that. That is not tolerated at all.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, because really what it sounds like is what you're advocating is, hey, your body has a story to tell. if we incorporate some tools, testing in this case, to find out what story will it tell us, then maybe we can use some of this evidence here to leverage chemotherapy in a better way or radiation in a better way. I know, that old saying, ignorance is bliss until it's not, right? So in this case, we're looking for the story that the body's willing to tell. And we want to use the freedom at that point that we have with that new data to make the wisest decisions for treatment. And again, I'm speaking obviously for the patient themselves. That sounds, fantastic. The clients that are working with you typically, are they working with you for a month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? How long do they team up with you for?
Yeah, my program is a year. So all my clients are in it for a year, and it usually takes that long to really deal with all these things. I kind of give the analogy of like it's a like messed up ball of yarn. You got to kind of open this side up, loosen this side, because a lot of these, markers that we're seeing off, these are different systems that are affecting each other. And so if you start pulling this one, oh, that got better, and I didn't even do anything to it, and so this is the work. It also, we're including when you find, say, toxins. We don't stop there. I'll make a bold statement here. It is worthless to do detox generally. Like most cancer clients will do some kind of detox at some point, and it's completely worthless because they're not taking the time to test and see what toxins they have. And then the most important part, stop the inflow of those toxins. So if you are, if you've got like a boat and you've got a hole in it, you can shovel the water out all day long with detoxes. But if you've still got water coming in through the hole, what's the point? It's worthless. And so that's where I get really passionate about doing the detective work. What showed up? Okay, do we need to test the house or the water or and looking into those things to make sure it's not continuing to flow in. And it takes a while to do that.
Yeah, I completely respect, what you're saying, because the analogy is good. I often think about the house fire analogy. The house is on fire. You have the fire department there. They're putting water on the fire, but somebody's in the back throwing fresh, dry wood into the house fire. And
My
it just,
God.
it just keeps on burning, right? So I totally get what you're saying. Is there anything, is there any other concerns that patients should be made aware of at the very beginning? We've talked a lot about testing and the value of that, but based on your experience and the clients that you've worked with, are there any other concerns, other rocks that they need to kind of roll over to investigate aside from what we've discussed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of testing that's going to give us those objective markers, but the one area that is very important that does not have objective testing would be the emotional trauma. And so what we see clinically is that a year prior to a cancer diagnosis, there is usually something that has, deeply impacted the person that maybe hasn't been fully processed. And we know that these emotions and this kind of trauma can actually manifest and reside in our tissues, and we need to deal with this. There's a greater percentage of cancer clients have, adverse childhood events like abuse and things. Has that been dealt with? So this is the area I remember when I had cancer. I remember telling my practitioner, yeah, that emotional stuff, I'm going to avoid that. So we need to make sure we deal with that. You need to hold me accountable to it. And she didn't. The ball was dropped on that one. And it's taken me a while to really uncover and unpack on my own, like what my trauma was, and then to actually affect change on that. But I'm very happy to say I have. And I just can't encourage clients enough to not wait on that, because that definitely didn't help my journey, if you will.
I'm glad that you brought that up. And though there isn't a test per se that can be given to pinpoint the exact emotional trauma. What we do know currently is that PTSDs are real. Post-traumatic stress syndrome is real. That's an emotional trauma. And this is a really fascinating, topic that I can go down a crazy rabbit trail, and I won't, except to say the following, that the neurological pathways in our mind or in our brain are getting significantly rewired when there is a deep emotional event taking place that is negative or positive, that there is rewiring happening in real time that is much faster than, let's say, developing a new habit where we're doing, exercising every day for the next 90 days and it becomes a habit because we rewrote some neurological pathways in our minds. But in this case, if there's an emotional event that happens, maybe the death of a loved one, something with great sorrow you were not expecting, the phone call that you received, or maybe it was some happy news, whatever that might look like, but it's significantly emotional in nature. There is evidence that clearly states that is rewiring and changing things that are going on up here. And that has a biological downstream effect in our bodies. And it's a very fascinating topic, but I think it does go back to the story that our bodies are telling, or at least they want to tell. And that is a very different way of looking at healthcare altogether, because the Western mindset is, let's just isolate one thing. If we can fix this one thing, we can fix everything. But that's not what you're explaining today. You're saying, wait a minute, there's many things, and we need to get in the weeds a little bit to find out what's here.
Yeah. 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 And it's interesting, Robert, because a lot of times this is the one that's brushed aside because people are like, oh, that's kind of woo, or they don't understand it. Or when there's not a test to prove it to them, a lot of times it's dismissed. And, for a lot of people, their first choice is traditional counseling, talk therapy. And I'm just going to be super direct. I don't find that that's usually very helpful, because what happens is, say they've got like an abusive relationship that they're crescendoed or something, they're going in to talk about this and they get all this stuff opened out on the table. And then it's like, oh, hour's up. And now they're so upset and distraught and depressed and anxious. Are they doing their diet? Are they changing the way they eat? No, they want wine and cheese and bread, right? Are they taking their supplements? Are they doing their lifestyle changes? No, they're sitting in a box over there. And so, there's some really cool tools. And this is not something that I do. I'm not trained in this. I refer my clients to, there's lots of different programs and practitioners that do some of these therapies that people can really get change, rewire the brain like you're talking about to deal with that trauma in real time, closed, it's done. It doesn't create this upheaval. And I have used these myself, nothing, anti-God or anything, or really, woo. It's just getting into the biology, and it's absolutely amazing. And people just need to know that there's tools out there like that without having to dig up your past and relive it all. That's traumatic in and of itself a lot of times.
That's good. I'm glad you're bringing this up at the end of this podcast, because it's really important. It's really, our society is so very overwhelmed with a lot of information and what they hear, what they read online, etc. And a lot of it, quite frankly, puts you in a very bad mood. And it's funny, but that bad mood is generated in a matter of just a few moments. And yet we don't think that our emotions play a role in our health.
Yeah.
And yet, if something makes us angry, we're filling up with cortisol. We're upset. And it's not healthy for us. We know stress is not healthy. And who hasn't been in the company of somebody and said something along the lines of, I really don't like that person. I don't feel good around that person. Or, you're around a positive person or a happy person, you're like, wow, that's a great individual. I'd love to be around them some more,
Yeah.
right? Because we feel happy. I, for one, would rather feel happier 9 times out of 10, I think. So I think that would have a healing effect just on my day. So I'm glad that you're working with your clients on this topic.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And things like, gratitude journals and having fun, we stress those because, I mean, those are the cheap and easy, low hanging fruit that people overlook a lot of times that really do make a big difference. And, it's really hard when you're being grateful to be mad, it's just, they
Yeah,
go hand in hand.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Katrina, thank you. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. There's been a lot of good dialogue here and some things that the audience is going to find very valuable. So once again, I just want to remind everyone, if you would like to work with Katrina and learn more about her organization, you'll find her at cancerfreedom.com. Once again, that's cancerfreedom.com. She has a great website, talks about her story. You'll find where to put your information so that you can be contacted to see if it's a match for you. Anything else, Katrina, that you would like to say before we sign off today?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I also have a lot more resources, information if you liked this, at YouTube. It's just at Cancer Freedom. And I have an ebook. If you want, I can drop the link and give that to you, for your people.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll take that. We'll put that in the show notes so that everybody can get that as well. Thank you so much for mentioning that.
Mhm.
All right. Thanks again, Katrina. And we look forward to just recommending all kinds of patients to you to get to know you and the help that you offer them. All right.
Thanks.
All right. You take care.